April 4th, 1922. Three neighbors push open the barn door of an isolated Bavarian farmstead.
The hinges groan. The smell hits them first. There, stacked one upon another and covered in hay, lie four bodies: grandmother, mother, and a child, pressed together in death. But what sends a chill through their bones isn't just the corpses, it's the smoke still rising from the chimney. The cattle, recently fed. Someone has been living here, with them.
Welcome to the Creepy History Files.
Today we open the file on the Hinterkaifeck murders. To be warned, the killer didn't flee into the night. For 3 days they stayed, living among the dead.
The Gruber family lived at the edge of nowhere.
Their farm, Hinterkaifeck, sat about a mile north of the tiny hamlet of Kaifeck in rural Bavaria, roughly 43 miles from Munich. The name itself told the story. Hinterkaifeck, behind Kaifeck, a place you had to deliberately seek out, bordered by dense forest on one side and farmland stretching into emptiness on the other. The family kept to themselves. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, ran the household with an iron fist and a reputation for cruelty. His wife, Cecilia, 72, had inherited the farm from a previous marriage. Their widowed daughter, Victoria, 35, had returned home after her husband, Karl, was killed at the Battle of Arras in 1914. She brought with her 7-year-old Cecilia, named after her grandmother, and 2-year-old Joseph, whose father's identity was whispered about but never confirmed.
The whispers were dark.
In 1914, Andreas and Victoria had been convicted of incest. He served a year in prison. She bore the shame. The neighbors knew. Everyone knew. But rural Bavaria in the early 20s had its own way of handling scandal. Silence, averted eyes, and a family left increasingly alone. The days before March 31st, 1922, brought strange signs that would only make sense later. 6 months earlier, the maid Crescens Rieger had quit her position, claiming the farmhouse was haunted. She'd heard footsteps in the attic, heavy, deliberate. She felt eyes watching her, always watching, though no one was ever there.
Andreas noticed things too.
In the fresh snow, he found footprints leading from the forest to the farm's machine room, a door with a broken lock. But there were no footprints leading away. Someone had walked in. No one had walked out. That same night, the whole family heard it. Footsteps overhead in the attic. Andreas searched. He found nothing. Several house keys went missing in the days that followed. Neighbors offered him a gun. He refused. Whatever Andreas Gruber believed was happening, he chose to face it alone.
On Friday, March 31st, a new maid arrived.
Maria Baumgartner, 44 years old, was escorted to the farm by her sister that afternoon. They said their goodbyes. The sister left. She would be the last person to see the family alive. That evening, between 6 and 7 o'clock, 6 people were murdered. The investigation that followed would span decades and produce nothing but questions. When neighbors finally broke into the property on April 4th, it was because no one had seen the family for days. Young Cecilia had missed school. Victoria had missed choir practice. The cattle were crying out, hungry and distressed. Something was wrong.
The search party was led by Lorenz Schlittenbauer,
A neighbor who had been in a relationship with Victoria after his wife died. Many believed he was Joseph's father. They found the barn first. 4 bodies stacked like cordwood, covered in hay. Andreas, Cecilia Sr., Victoria, and young Cecilia. All had been killed with the family's own mattock, a heavy agricultural tool like a pickaxe, capable of crushing bone. The injuries were catastrophic. Andreas's face was destroyed, cheekbones protruding from shredded flesh. His wife had 8 holes in the right side of her skull and strangulation marks around her neck. But it was Victoria who had suffered most. 9 wounds to her head, strangulation marks, her face smashed beyond recognition. She had been the target of particular rage.
And then there was the child.
7-year-old Cecilia had not died quickly. The autopsy would later reveal she survived for 2 to 3 hours after the attack. She lay there beneath her family's bodies in the darkness of the barn, slowly dying. When they found her, she was clutching tufts of her own hair in her small hands. She had torn it out in agony. Inside the house, they found two more victims. 2-year-old Joseph lay dead in his bassinet, killed by a single massive blow to the face. Maria Baumgartner, the new maid who had only arrived that afternoon, was dead in her bedchamber, a wound 4 centimeters deep in her skull. These archives hold things that resist explanation. Subscribe if you dare to keep looking.
But the bodies were not the most disturbing discovery.
Inspector Georg Reingruber arrived from Munich around noon that day. What he documented would haunt investigators for a century. The killer had not fled. They had stayed. For approximately 3 days after the murders, someone remained at Hinterkaifeck. They ate food from the kitchen, they fed the livestock and tended to the animals. They used the fireplace. Neighbors had seen smoke rising from the chimney over the weekend, on days when everyone inside was already dead. A calendar on the farmhouse wall showed April 1st. Someone had torn off the March 31st page the morning after the slaughter.
The perpetrator had lived among the corpses.
Slept in the beds, cooked meals, walked past the barn where the bodies lay stacked and covered. For 3 days. Why? Over 100 suspects were questioned in the years that followed. Every lead reached a dead end. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who had led the search party, exhibited behavior that raised suspicions. He mysteriously produced a key to unlock the front door after finding the bodies. He entered the house alone before others followed. In 1925, he was found visiting the demolished farm site and made an odd comment, stating that the killer's attempt to bury the family's remains in the barn had been hindered by frozen ground. How did he know that?
Schlittenbauer was never charged.
He won multiple slander lawsuits against those who called him the murderer and died in 1941, taking whatever he knew to the grave. Some theorized Victoria's husband Karl had returned. Though officially killed at the Battle of Arras in 1914, his body was never recovered. Witnesses claimed to have seen him after the war. Did he come back, discover the incest conviction, learn that Joseph might not be his son, and unleash his rage? Soldiers who served with him were eventually located. They confirmed his death. He was officially ruled out in December 1923.
The most chilling theory concerned the footprints in the snow.
Someone had walked from the forest to the farm. No one had walked away. The attic noises that plagued the family for months. The newspaper from Munich that no one had purchased. The missing keys. Had someone been living on the property for weeks before the murders, hiding in the attic, watching, waiting? The crime scene was hopelessly contaminated. Dozens of curious locals had trampled through before police could arrive. Forensic science in 1922 was primitive. There was no DNA testing, no reliable fingerprinting. In desperation, investigators turned to clairvoyance. The victims' heads were removed and sent to Munich for what was called metaphysical examination.
It revealed nothing.
The farm was demolished in 1923 to prevent it from becoming a macabre pilgrimage site. During the demolition, workers discovered the murder weapon hidden in the loft of the barn, a blood-stained mattock overlooked in the initial investigation. They also found a penknife in the hay. In 1971, a woman wrote a letter claiming that as a 12-year-old she had overheard the mother of 2 local brothers confess that her sons committed the murders. The mother allegedly said that one of them, Andreas, regretted losing his penknife.
Nothing came of it. The case was officially closed in 1955.
But the questions never stopped. In 2007, students at the Fürstenfeldbruck Police Academy reopened the cold case using modern criminological techniques. They analyzed the evidence, the patterns, the psychology. They concluded that the crime was triggered by a personal, emotional conflict. They agreed on a prime suspect. Out of respect for surviving family members, the name was never released. DNA samples taken from preserved evidence were too degraded to produce matches.
The file remains open.
The victims are buried in Friedhof Weidhofen Cemetery. They lie there without their heads. The skulls sent to Munich in 1922 for examination were lost during World War II and have never been recovered. The only survivor of that night was the family's German Spitz, a small dog that witnessed everything and lived. The family of Karl Gabriel, Victoria's late husband, took the animal in, nursed it back to health, and cared for it for the rest of its days. Today, a small concrete memorial marks the location where Hinterkaifeck once stood. The forests still border the site. The isolation remains. At night, when the wind moves through the bare trees, you might imagine you hear footsteps, someone walking from the forest toward the farm. Walking in, never walking out.
Who stayed at Hinterkaifeck for 3 days after the murders, living among the dead?
What drove them to such violence and what compelled them to remain? Why was Victoria singled out for the most brutal attack? Who was hiding in that attic for months, watching a family that knew something was wrong but couldn't find the danger that surrounded them? The investigators in 2007 believe they know who did this. They have a name. They will never speak it.
What do you think happened? The file remains open. Another file has landed on the desk. The seal remains unbroken, for now. Subscribe to be there when it opens. See you in the dark.